This is Kakadu National Park in Australia's Northern Territory. At half the size of Switzerland, it contains tropical savanna, wetlands, the sandstone escarpment of the Arnhem Land Plateau, and a variety of flora and fauna. Kakadu was the first of 4 national parks I visited in Australia's Northern Territory. The park is situated in the country's tropical north and experiences a 2-season climate. Although I visited at the end of the dry season, when the water had receded into rivers and billabongs, there are still areas of large wetland to be seen. The wetlands provide rich habitat for a huge variety of birds and other wildlife, such as these Australasian swamp hens, which live together in groups of up to a dozen, and magpie geese, which can be seen in great numbers throughout the park. The long, hot, dry season and vast areas of grassy savanna and woodlands mean that bushfires are a normal part of life here in Kakadu. Although many fires are naturally occurring, both the park authorities and the Aboriginal population actively use fire to manage the land. So I'm heading up to Cahill's Crossing on the East Alligator River to see some crocodiles. I've been told this is a great place to see crocodiles, particularly around high tide, which just happens to be in about 2 hours from now. The reason for this is that as the water gets higher during high tide, it overflows the top of the causeway of the crossing, and the fish are now pushed upstream with the tide, and they pretty much swim straight into the open mouths of the crocodiles. The crossing is one of the main routes in and out of Arnhem Land, a major Aboriginal community in northern Australia. A permit is required for entry into Arnhem Land, however the amassed crocodiles also form a significant deterrent to would-be trespassers. The East Alligator River is one of 3 alligator rivers, east, west and south, that were named in 1820 by explorer Philip Parker King, who mistook the crocs for alligators. The particular crocs here are saltwater crocodiles, the largest and most aggressive of all crocodiles and the largest living reptile. The salties, as they're called locally, can be found a reasonable distance inland, even in freshwater rivers, swamps and billabongs. Swimming in any water in these parts can be extremely dangerous. During my visit, a total of 12 crocs were visible, however it's not uncommon for up to 40 to assemble for a high tide feast. The following morning I got up early and headed to Yellowwater Billabong for a sunrise wildlife viewing boat tour. Dawn's a great time to see wildlife before the heat and sunshine force them to retreat. One of the largest animals I got to see was this feral water buffalo, a descendant of buffalo brought to Australia in the 1800s to be farmed. Although this is a freshwater area, it's home to a number of salties, taking advantage of the readily available supply of food. From Kakadu, I headed south to the neighbouring Nitmiluk National Park. Here, I found thousands of fruit bats who have taken over the trees around the area visited by humans. It's believed that the human presence deters some of the bats' predators. However, the park's main attraction is Katherine Gorge, carved by the Katherine River through the sandstone plateau. I took a boat tour to visit the lower part of the gorge, which follows a series of 90-degree bends formed as the river cut through a grid of fault lines, following the easiest path. This geologic process also created smaller side gorges, which descend to meet the main gorge at the bends in the river. Although the gorge isn't as deep or wide as some other well-known gorges in canyons, the sheer orange cliffs and narrowness give it a very dramatic feel. This is the beginning of the Southern Walks, a series of walking tracks to the south of Katherine Gorge. Katherine Gorge is the centrepiece of the park and it's actually made up of 13 separate gorges. The walking tracks cover routes up to gorge number 9. That's a multi-day trip. So today I'm taking a single day hike and I'm going to visit 3 main areas. I'm going to visit Pat's Lookout, where I should be able to see a good view of gorge number 2. Then I'm going to go up to Jedda's Rock and see further up that same gorge, and then back and up along this fault line here to Butterfly Gorge, where I should get a fantastic view up gorge number 3. The side gorges provide convenient routes down from the plateau to the river. This one, at a place called Southern Rock Hole, is a good example. The track leads to a seasonal waterfall, dry at this time of year, and a bend in the river in the first gorge. What goes down must come up, so retracing my steps back up to the plateau, I headed to Pat's Lookout for a view of Gorge 1 from above, and then on to Jedda's Rock to see Gorge 2. Butterfly Gorge is aptly named for the large number of butterflies that take flight from the rocks as a walker approaches. From Nitmiluk in the tropical north, I took a flight south to Alice Springs, just south of the Tropic of Capricorn and with a noticeably different climate. The third park I'm visiting is Western MacDonnell National Park near Alice Springs in Australia's Red Centre. This park protects the western side of the MacDonnell mountain range. The range itself is around 400 miles long and was formed over 300 million years ago. The park and its range are best known for the spectacular red gorges, gaps and chasms. And I'm going to start my visit here today at Stanley Chasm, and I've been told that noon is the best time to visit. And the reason for that is because when the sun is directly overhead, it beams down into the extremely narrow chasm, illuminating both sides, creating a beautiful orange glow. From Stanley Chasm, I headed west to visit Ormiston Gorge. While most visitors view the gorge from the downstream end near the car park, I followed the 10-kilometre walking track via a ring of mountains called Ormiston Pound, which took me into the upstream end of the gorge. At its deepest, the gorge is 300 metres, with bright orange cliffs towering above permanent waterholes. Heading back east to Alice Springs, I visited Simpson's Gap, home to a number of rare and somewhat elusive rock wallabies. This type of wallaby lives on boulder-strewn slopes, and they blend into their surroundings very well, making spotting them challenging. This was my third visit to the Gap, having come away empty-handed without seeing the marsupials on my previous 2 visits. The MacDonnell Range continues further east beyond Alice Springs, and this is Tjoritja Gorge in what they call the East Mac. And this was where I got to see this giant amongst lizards. It's a parenti, a huge monitor lizard. It's one of the largest lizards in the world and can grow up to 8 feet long. This particular example was around 5 feet and appeared to take no notice of me as it wandered down the gorge, tasting the air, foraging for food. Back in the western part of the MacDonnell Range, I visited the well-named Red Bank Gorge, which closes into a water-filled chasm only a couple of feet wide. So I've reached the end of my visit here at West MacDonnell National Park, and I'm now heading to Watarrka National Park in Kings Canyon. That's really only about 130 kilometres that way to the southwest. By four-wheel drive track, it's 248 kilometres. I can't go that way, I have to travel on sealed roads, so I'll be heading that way for 600 kilometres to reach it. This is Watarrka National Park, and behind me is the George Gill Range. In amongst there is Kings Canyon, and the best way to see the canyon is from the 6.5 kilometre rim walk, and that's where I'm heading next. But before that, I got a chance to see the canyon from a helicopter, clearly seeing how the canyon cuts into the plateau. The walking track starts with a steep climb out of the canyon up to the rim, giving great views of the length of the main part of the canyon. From the air, the plateau looked fairly flat, but up close it's a labyrinth of domes and passageways. I ended my visit to Watarrka National Park, the final of the 4 parks I visited, at a part of the canyon known as the Garden of Eden, a secluded oasis in the upper reaches of the canyon. It's here I say farewell to Australia's Northern Territory.